So look at this question. At first, the television service is available at no charge. सही है, no charge का क्या मतलब है कि कोई भी price charge नहीं हो रहा. The price is technically zero. सही है, so zero है तो quantity demanded is 5,000. The television company then charges viewers $6 per hour to watch its program. The demand curve is D. What is the value of loss in consumer surplus and what value of consumer surplus remains after the introduction of the hourly charge? सही है, जब आपके पास zero charge था, this whole area was a consumer surplus. ये सारा का सारा क्या था? This was all the consumer surplus. सही है, so earlier the consumer surplus was this triangle. अगर आप इसका area calculate करो, so the area of triangle is 1/2 into base into height. So the base is 5,000 multiplied by height, which is 10. It was $25,000 earlier the consumer surplus. Now you have to identify the loss in the consumer surplus. अब जब उन्होंने $6 charge करना शुरू कर दिया, what is the price? What is the consumer surplus? Consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve and above the market price. So this area, when the price is $6, this whole area, this triangle, new one, is the consumer surplus now. So now 1/2, the base is 2,000 multiplied by 4. $4,000. $4,000 is the new consumer surplus, which means the loss of the consumer surplus is 21,000 because earlier the consumer surplus was 25. Now it is 4,000. So the loss is consumer surplus and the remaining one is again, ये हमने calculate पहले ही कर लिया, it is 4,000. Okay? So this is your change in the consumer surplus. Usually in the consumer surplus वाले जो भी आपके MCQs होते हैं, आपको एरिया निकालना आना चाहिए, ट्राइंगल की आपको एरिया का फॉर्मूला पता होना चाहिए या ट्रेपेजियम के एरिया का फॉर्मूला पता होना चाहिए, so that you can calculate the consumer surplus. Moving forward, look at this question. The diagram shows the effect on the market for a product of the introduction of a government subsidy. Say government subsidy आ गई, supply curve shifts to S2. Now, what is the result of the payment of the subsidy? Payment of the subsidy से क्या हुआ? Consumer surplus increases the price of to the consumer half. Price पहले था 15 that the consumers were paying, which was your equilibrium price. Now the consumers are paying $10, which means half नहीं हुआ. Half होता तो 7.5 होता. B is incorrect.
Do
Anyway, the subsidy provides over half of the producer's income. Producer की income पहले थी 15 multiplied by 30. सही है, अब क्या हो रहा है? Now it is subsidy के बाद this whole area is the consumer income. So the consumer income is increasing. सही है, and it is not being provided half by the government. And D get total consumer expenditure of the product increases. Consumer expenditure नीचे चला गया है. सही है, 10 into 40, 15 into 30. So the consumer expenditure is now less. So this is also incorrect. Consumer surplus will increase. पहले consumer surplus ये सारा area था, जहाँ तक आपका demand curve जा रहा था. Now this whole area will also be added into the consumer surplus because subsidy के बाद price कम हो गया. A local government decides to issue a card for residents that give 15% reduction on entry prices for visit to the local. Local government decides to issue the card at 50% reduction. Say 50% reduction के बाद अगर पहले price $2 था, now the price will be $1 for the people. The diagram shows the demand curve for the residents who currently makes 3 visits to the museum. What would be the change in the residents' consumer surplus when the card is issued? जब card issue होगा, what will be the change in the consumer surplus? Obviously, पहले consumer surplus क्या था? This whole area, which was area W. But since now the price is going to $1, this area X plus Y will be added into the consumer surplus. So what would be the change in the residence consumer surplus? It will be x plus y. Yeah. Say it. The number of passenger journeys per week by train on a certain route is shown by the demand curve in the diagram. Initially, the fare was OP, but it is then reduced by PW. Now, OW is the new price. Which area measures the amount is spent on the extra journey resulting from the lower fares? So now what is the amount spent on extra journeys? What will be the amount? Price multiplied by the quantity. सही है? तो पहले आपकी जर्नीज कितनी थी? OR. OR was the quantity. But now the extra journeys are RS. सही है? This is added because of reduction in the price by PW. So this whole area, new quantity जो add हुई है multiplied by the lower price. So this area will be URST. URST will be the expenditure on the added journeys. The extra journeys है उनपे जो expenditure हो रहा है, this is URST. Is that clear? नहीं, B नहीं होगा. B तो बेटा PWTV होता है, reduction in the consumer, increase in the consumer surplus. B वो होता. Price कम हो गया और quantity ज्यादा हो गई, तो बोल रहे हैं extra journeys पे कितना पैसा लग रहा है. The diagram shows the European airline market. New entrants have come into the market, shifting the supply outwards to S2. Which area represents the new producer surplus? Now, what will be the new producer surplus? This is the price. The new price is this one. Yeah. So this area below the market price and above the supply curve is the new producer surplus, which is HNK. This area will be the new producer surplus. In the diagram, S1 is the original supply curve and D is the original demand curve. This is your new supply curve. This is the demand curve. Original supply curve and the demand curve. Yeah. If the supply shifts to S2, which area represents the change in the consumer surplus? Again, अगर supply S2 पे चली गई तो ये हो गया. So which area represents the change? Change कितना आ रहा है? This trapezium is the change in the consumer surplus because now the price has gone up to OT and the quantity fell to OM. So this area will be PTRV. PRVT ये वाला होगा C. सही है? नहीं RV सॉरी Q होगा. ये तो Q होगा. PTVQ. So this is by mistake. It should be A. हाँ C नहीं होगा. It should be PVQT. A market is in equilibrium at the price $5. The market supply curve changes from being inelastic to at each price to become more elastic. The market equilibrium does not change. What is the effect on the consumer and the producer surplus? पहले भाई supply inelastic थी. Like let's say this is your demand curve and this was the supply curve and this was the market price $5. अब क्या हो रहा है? Now the supply is becoming more elastic. Now this is S2 is the new supply curve. तो क्या होगा भाई? एक चीज अनचेंज कौन सी है? कंज्यूमर सरप्लस विल रिमेन अनचेंज. सही है? बिकॉज पहले भी ये वाला हिस्सा था कंज्यूमर सरप्लस में, अभी भी यही है. बिकॉज द मार्केट प्राइस is not changing at all. So the consumer surplus will remain unchanged. What will happen to the producer surplus? The producer surplus will fall. सही है? पहले आपका producer surplus ज़्यादा था. Now the producer surplus will fall because the supply has become more elastic. D1 S and S1 represents the initial demand and supply curve for a product. So D1 and S1, this is your initial market, which means पहले आपके पास R plus T था, old consumer surplus, and U was old producer surplus. What are the resulting changes in the consumer and the producer surplus? Now D2 and S2 are the new supply curve. So आप supply curve ये हो गया. This is your consumer surplus. Then P is the new consumer surplus, and R plus Q is the new producer surplus. So the change in the consumer surplus is from RT to P. Say, and the change in the producer surplus is from U to Q and R. The answer will be B. A well-known clothes retailer decides to have a summer sale in its shop. As a result, the number of people who use the shops increases. Which area measures the change in the consumer surplus for the customers who would have bought the clothes anyway, and the surplus for the new consumers? वो बोलेंगे भाई दोनों के लिए क्या चेंज होगा? देखो ये आपका ओरिजिनल प्राइस है, and at this original price, this was the quantity. ये वो लोग हैं who will buy the clothes anyway. सही है, regardless sale हो या ना हो. The old consumer surplus था इनका J, but luckily due to sales the price is going down. सही है, so people who are still buying quantity Q naught will have K added in their consumer surplus. So existing consumers का क्या हो जाएगा? Area K add हो जाएगा, and ये जो Q1 तक आ रही है quantity, Q naught से Q1 तक, ये किन लोगों की quantity है? जो अब आए हैं गुड खरीदने के लिए because of the sales. इनकी मोटिवेशन सेल्स थी. सो एरिया L will be for the new consumers. सही है, and what is the change for the old consumers? It is K. सही है, उनका एरिया K से इंक्रीज कर गया, इनका एरिया L से इंक्रीज कर गया. आंसर विल बी C. A नहीं होगा. A कब होता है? जब वो पूछते कि what is the consumer surplus, but they are asking which area measures the change in the consumer surplus. The diagram shows the consumer's demand for the product. How does the consumer surplus changes as the price of the product rises in $5 step? सही भाई, $5 से बढ़ रहा है, 5 से 10 पे चला गया, फिर 10 से 15, फिर 15 to 20, फिर 20 to 25. बोले consumer surplus कैसे change हो रहा है? Let's say when the price was $5, this was the consumer surplus. Now if the price increases to $10, अब ये हो गया, this is the loss in the consumer surplus. When the price increases, but when the price goes to 15, now this area is the loss in the consumer surplus. And when the price goes to 20, this is the area of consumer consumer surplus that will be lost. And when the price goes to 25, now this is the area. So what is happening to the changes in the consumer surplus? Area जो है वो reduce होता जा रहा है. सही है, एरिया रिड्यूस हो रहा है. सो कॉन्स्टेंटली तो नहीं हो रहा ना, कांस्टेंट अमाउंट से हो रहा है. इट फॉल्स बाय डिक्रीजिंग अमाउंट. इट फॉल्स बाय डिक्रीजिंग अमाउंट एज द प्राइस चेंजेस इन स्टेप्स. सही है, जब आप $5 से प्राइस बढ़ाओगे कंज्यूमर सरप्लस नीचे जाता रहेगा, बट विद अ डिक्रीजिंग रेट द एरिया विल बी फॉलिंग. इज दैट क्लियर? Why not B? B क्या भाई? Falls by the constant amount. Constant amount से नहीं हो रहा ना मेरा बच्चा. अगर आप ये एरिया ऐड, अगर मैं इस ट्रेपेजियम का रेड वाले का एरिया कैलकुलेट करूं, it will be 1/2 into height is let's say 5 and this is कितना हो जाएगा ये 12.5 plus 10. So this will be 17.5 multiplied by 5. ये एरिया है. अगर इस वाले ट्रेपेजियम का मैं एरिया कैलकुलेट करूं सेकंड वन का, तो एरिया फॉल कर रहा है 1/2 into again 5 into this is 7.5 plus 10. सही है. So this is 5 again. This area will be 12.5 multiplied by 5. तो आपका एरिया रिड्यूस होता जा रहा है. सही है. एरिया रिड्यूस होगा तो अमाउंट भी कम हो रहा होगा कंज्यूमर सरप्लस का. कांस्टेंट रेट का मतलब है कि रेट सेम है. सही. जिस हिसाब से आपका वो होना चाहिए, द फॉल होना चाहिए एरिया में, वो सेम है ना. एरिया का फॉल सेम है ना अमाउंट का फॉल सेम है. In the diagram, D is the demand curve for Indian tea exports and S1 is the initial supply curve. The Indian government removes the tax on tea exports, which causes the supply to shift to S2. Supply shift हो गई S2 पे. Which area in the diagram measures the resulting loss in the tax revenue to the Indian government and resulting gain in the consumer surplus? Again, gain क्या हो जाएगा? गेन इन द कंज्यूमर सरप्लस सिर्फ एक ही है, ये एक्स और जेड. सही है. और लॉस इन द टैक्स रेवेन्यू, पहले आपका जो पर यूनिट टैक्स था वो ये था. सही है. द डिफरेंस बिटवीन द सप्लाई कर्व्स. सो एक्स प्लस वाई वाज द लॉस ऑफ द टैक्स रेवेन्यू टू द गवर्नमेंट. इज दिस क्लियर? The diagram shows the supply and demand curves for a commodity. A government subsidy causes the supply curve to shift to S2. Which area measures the difference between the cost to the economy of producing the resulting increase in output quantity Q1, Q2 and the value of the consumer places on this increase in the output. हाँ भाई, कौन सा area आपको show कर रहा है the cost, what is the cost of the subsidy and the value consumer places. Why area B? देखो ये आपका है ना. Which area measures the difference between the cost to the economy? Cost क्या हो जाएगी economy को? The cost to the economy will be per unit multiplied by the quantity. सही है. Increase in the resulting output Q1 से Q2 पे and the value the consumer places. और value consumer क्या place करते हैं इस good पे? This is your price. सही. So the difference between this cost and the value that the consumers are placing for the good will be area A only. The diagram shows an increase in the demand curve. D1 से D2 चला गया भाई. What effect does this change have? Change in demand have on the producer surplus. अगर demand increase हो रही है, so consumer producer surplus किस तरह से change होगा? पहले यहाँ था when the demand was D1 and the supply is S1, but now it will go to this point because the demand is increasing. To W पे चला गया. सही. W पे जाएगा. So what will be the area of increase in the producer surplus? It will be P1, P2, W, Y. So it will increase by P1, P2, Y, W. सही है? The diagram shows an individual's demand curve for a commodity. The supplier of the commodity charges a unit price of OP, but the consumers are currently required to purchase a minimum amount of OQ. See, consumers के लिए क्या requirement है कि भाई उन्होंने OQ amount खरीदनी है. अच्छा जी. Which area in the diagram measures the net gain in the consumer surplus from the removal of the minimum purchase requirement? अगर minimum purchase requirement हट जाए, अगर हटा दी जाए, abolish कर दी जाए, so what will be the area that will change? देखो, अगर आप मिनिमम अमाउंट की रिक्वायरमेंट रखते हो, सही है, so होना क्या चाहिए था? At this point, if the price was P1, let's say, सही है, तो P1 पे क्या होता है? P1 पे आपको X plus Y का कंज्यूमर सरप्लस मिल जाता, बट एट द सेम टाइम आपने उनको क्या किया हुआ है? यू हैव फिक्स द प्राइस एट ओपी, सही है, और ओपी के साथ साथ नहीं, इट वोंट बी वाई, आप ओपी के साथ साथ क्या कर रहे हो? आपने उनको ये भी बोला हुआ है कि आपने क्वांटिटी खरीदनी है ओक्यू, क्योंकि अगर आप ओपी रखते प्राइस, द कंज्यूमर्स वुड हैव बॉट लेसर क्वांटिटी Q1, सही है. तो जब आप ये हटा दोगे, सही है, इफ यू अबॉलिश दिस रिक्वायरमेंट ऑफ बाइंग द गुड एट ओपी एंड बाइंग ओक्यू क्वांटिटी, तो कंज्यूमर्स, अगर आप कंज्यूमर्स की विलिंगनेस से देखोगे, दे विल बाय एट P1, they will buy at P1 quantity Q, सही है, which still makes sure that they will be retaining area Y. So what is the net gain? Net gain क्या होगा consumers को? This area will be the net gain in the consumer surplus because they didn't wish to buy OQ at P1 OP, सही है, वो OP पे नहीं खरीदना चाहते क्वांटिटी OQ, लेकिन अगर आप प्राइस को रिड्यूस कर दोगे to P1, then they might buy, सही है. So the only area is area Z, which will be the net gain in the consumer surplus. अगर आप minimum buying requirement हटा दो तो. The answer will be D, not B. जल्दी से पढ़ो भाई वाला क्वेश्चन. मैं चाहता हूँ अभी दोबारा उस पर. अब इसमें क्या होगा? What is there? If there is a reduction in the toll from $5 to 3, what is the resulting increase in the consumer surplus? So what will be the resulting increase in the consumer surplus? ये जो एरिया है आपका ट्रेपीजियम वाला, इसका एरिया क्या आ रहा है? सबका सी आ रहा है. एक मिनट, 2 into 1. हाँ, the answer will be 3000. That will be the resulting increase in the consumer surplus. The diagram shows the effect of imposition of a tax equal to FG. सही भाई, ये आपका पैरेलल डिफरेंस का टैक्स लग गया पर यूनिट का. FG on the commodity. Which area represents the reduction in the consumer surplus? Again, पहले ये था सारा consumer surplus. Now this will be the consumer surplus. So which area represents the change? It is this trapezium, which is U X and Y. So this one is the change in the consumer surplus.